I've calculated that 10 years of fatherhood services at the industry standard rate comes to exactly $45,000, and I expect payment within 30 days. My stepfather Richard announced, sliding a professionally bound invoice across the mahogany conference table with the same cold precision he'd used to schedule my childhood. The itemized list included everything from breakfast preparation, $5 per meal to attendance at school events, $100 per hour to emotional support during puberty, $500 per incident. As if raising a child was billable hours and love came with a rate card. But when my lawyer, Jameson Clarke, pulled out a manila folder and said, "Mr. Dalton, before we discuss your invoice, perhaps you should explain why Daniel's biological father's estate has been depositing $3,000 monthly into your account for the past decade." I watched the man who'd monetized my childhood turn the color of old paper. Richard's attorney, a nervous-looking man named Brewster, dropped his pen. It clattered on the table like a judge's gavel, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent conference room. My mother, Linda, who'd been sitting beside Richard in solidarity, slowly turned to stare at her husband with an expression I'd never seen before, like she was looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. That's not relevant to this matter," Richard stammered, his usual CEO composure cracking like thin ice. "This is about services rendered. Services that were already paid for," Jameson interrupted smoothly, spreading documents across the table. "By a dead man who loved his son more than you apparently ever did." I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what I was hearing. My father, Marcus Stone, had died when I was 7, a heart attack at 35, devastating and sudden. Mom had remarried Richard a year later, and he'd made it clear from day one that stepfatherhood was a burden he was accepting, not a joy he was embracing. "Let's start from the beginning," Judge Patricia Thornton said, studying us over her reading glasses. This was a settlement conference, not a formal trial, but Richard had insisted on the official setting. He always did like his stages. "Mr. Stone, Daniel, can you explain your relationship with Mr. Dalton?" I stood slowly, my legs unsteady. "Richard married my mother when I was 8. For the next 10 years, until I left for college, he was my stepfather. Though father might be too generous a term." "Ungrateful," Richard muttered, but Judge Thornton silenced him with a look. "He ran our household like a corporation," I continued. "Chore charts with penalty clauses. Grade requirements with financial incentives. Scheduled family time that felt more like board meetings. I thought that was just his way of showing love, through structure and spreadsheets. I didn't know he was keeping actual invoices." "When did you learn about these charges?" "Last month. My mom passed away from cancer 6 weeks ago." My voice caught, but I pushed through. At the reading of her will, Richard presented me with this invoice. Said now that Mom was gone, it was time to settle accounts. "He gave you a bill at your mother's will reading?" The judge's voice carried a note of disgust. "Said it was what Mom would have wanted. All debts cleared, clean slate." I laughed bitterly. Apparently, my childhood was a debt. "Mr. Dalton," Judge Thornton turned to Richard, "explain these charges." Richard straightened his tie, the same nervous gesture he'd done before every performance review he'd given me as a child. "Your Honor, I took on the responsibility of raising another man's child. I provided food, shelter, transportation, education oversight, and emotional support. These are quantifiable services with market values." "You charged him for driving to school?" "My time has value. The average chauffeur costs." "He's your stepson, not a client," the judge interrupted. "Continue, Mr. Clarke. You mentioned payments from the biological father's estate." Jameson opened his folder with the satisfied air of a poker player showing a royal flush. "Marcus Stone was my client. Before his death, he set up a trust for Daniel's care. Upon his remarriage to Linda Dalton, he was concerned about his son's well-being. So he made an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" I asked, though I was starting to fear the answer. "He offered Richard Dalton $3,000 per month to ensure Daniel was cared for. Not child support, that was separate, going directly to your mother. This was specifically for Richard, to, quote, compensate him for the father figure role and ensure my son never feels like a burden." The room spun. Every lecture about cost and responsibility, every reminder of what I owed for Richard's sacrifice, every time he'd made me feel like an unwanted expense, all while he was being paid to pretend to care. "That money was for household expenses," Richard protested. "No." Jameson pulled out bank records. "The $3,000 monthly went into your personal account. separate from the household account where child support was deposited. Over 10 years, that's $360,000. For comparison, your invoice here is for $45,000. So technically, Mr. Dalton, you owe Daniel $315,000 in change. That's not how it works. Richard stood abruptly. I performed services. You performed fraud, Jameson countered. You took money to care for a child, then charged the child for that care. That's double-dipping at best, fraud at worst. I found my voice through the shock. Did Mom know? About the payments. Richard's silence was answer enough. She didn't know, I said slowly. All those fights about money, her working 2 jobs while you invested in your startup. She didn't know you were getting $3,000 a month. It was my compensation. It was blood money. The words exploded out of me. My dead father paid you to love me, and you still couldn't manage it. You still made me feel like a debt, an obligation, a line item on a budget. Daniel, my mother's best friend, Sharon, spoke from the gallery. She'd come for moral support, not knowing she'd witnessed this revelation. Your mom called me the night before she died. She said she'd found something in Richard's office, something about money and your father. She was going to confront him, but the cancer had taken her first. My mother died not knowing the full truth about the man she'd trusted with her son. There's more, Jameson said quietly. Mr. Stone didn't just leave monthly payments. He left letters, one for each year, to be given to Richard with the annual payment summary. He pulled out a stack of envelopes, each marked with a year. May I read one, Daniel? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Year 3, Jameson read. Richard, I hope this finds you and my son well. The money continues as long as you treat Daniel as your own. Not as a burden, not as an obligation, but as a son. I'm trusting you with my greatest treasure. The money isn't payment. It's a reminder that someone is watching, someone who loved him first and always. Don't let him feel unwanted. Don't let him feel like he costs too much to love. I'm counting on you to be the father I can't be. Marcus. Richard had gone pale. Those were private. Were they? Jameson pulled out another document. Because you signed a contract acknowledging receipt of these letters and agreeing to the terms. You legally agreed to treat Daniel as your own son in exchange for these payments. Then you bill him for that exact service? Your Honor, Brewster finally found his voice. Surely there's some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Judge Thornton said coldly, is Mr. Dalton thinking he could monetize a sacred trust. A dying father paid him to love his son, and he turned that love into an invoice. I stood up, needing to move, to process. Every baseball game you attended, you complained about the time away from work. But you were being paid to be there. Every school conference, every driving lesson, every moment you acted put upon and inconvenienced, you were literally profiting from it. I gave you a stable home. You gave me a price tag. I turned to face him fully. Do you know what that does to a kid? To grow up believing you're a financial burden to your own family? To apologize for existing because you cost too much. You had everything you needed. I needed a father. My voice cracked. And my real father tried to buy me one. He paid you $360,000 to love me, and you couldn't even fake it convincingly. Sharon stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, I have text messages. Linda sent them over the years, worried about Richard's treatment of Daniel. She says here, he keeps a ledger of everything he spends on Danny. Makes him sign IOUs for new shoes. What kind of father does that? The kind who is already being paid, Judge Thornton said grimly. Mr. Dalton, I've seen many family disputes, but this is unconscionable. You accepted payment to act as a father, then tried to bill for the same services. That's not just greed, it's cruel. But the money was from a father who loved his son enough to try to protect him from beyond the grave, the judge continued. Instead, you proved why he needed that protection. You took his money and still made his child feel worthless. Jameson cleared his throat. There's one more thing. The trust has a clawback provision. If Richard failed to fulfill his duties as a caring stepfather, evidenced by any attempt to seek additional payment from Daniel, all funds are to be returned to Daniel's trust. All of them. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. Every penny, with interest. That's approximately $450,000. Richard slumped in his chair. The corporate titan who'd run my childhood like a hostile takeover was deflating before our eyes. I built a company with that money, he said quietly. It's worth millions now. Then you should have no problem returning what you stole, Judge Thornton said. Because that's what this is, theft. You stole money meant for Daniel's care. You stole his childhood by making him feel like a burden. You stole his mother's trust by hiding these payments. And you tried to steal his future by presenting him with a bill for your greed. Your honor, I said, surprising myself. I don't want the money. Everyone turned to stare at me. Daniel, Jameson warned, that's nearly $500,000. I know, I said. But I don't want money that was supposed to buy me love. It didn't work anyway. I looked at Richard. Keep it, but admit what you did. Admit that you took money to care for me and still made me feel worthless. Admit that every sacrifice you complained about was actually a paid performance. Richard's jaw worked silently. Finally, he spoke. I thought I was being practical, preparing you for the real world where everything has a cost. Everything does have a cost, I agreed. Your greed cost me a childhood. Your invoices cost me self-worth. Your ledgers cost my mother a real marriage. And now it's cost you everything, respect, reputation, and any chance of me ever calling you Dad. The money. Donate it, I said suddenly. All of it. To a charity for orphan children. Kids who actually need parents, not just service providers. Judge Thornton looked at me with something like approval. That's remarkably generous, considering. It's not generous, I interrupted. It's justice. My father wanted to buy me love. Richard proved love can't be bought. So let that money go where it might actually help. To kids who need homes, not hotels with hidden fees. If that's what you want, Jameson said, though he looked pained at the thought of losing such a clear-cut case. It is. I turned back to Richard one last time. You know what the saddest part is? If you just loved me, really loved me, without the ledgers and invoices, I'd have given you anything. Helped with your business, supported you in old age, been the son you never had. All you had to do was actually care. I did care. No, I said firmly. You carried out contracted obligations. There's a difference. My father knew it. That's why he put in the clawback clause. He knew that someone who could love a child wouldn't need payment, and someone who needed payment couldn't love a child. As we left the conference room, Sharon caught up with me. Your mother would be proud of you. And heartbroken about Richard. She loved him, I said simply. I think she hoped he'd learn to love me too. Love can't be learned from a ledger, Sharon said sadly. That night, I visited both my parents' graves. Mom's was fresh, the flowers still bright. Dad's was older, weathered, but I'd never stopped visiting. Hey, Dad, I said to the headstone. I finally met the ghost you left behind, all those payments trying to protect me. It didn't work the way you hoped, but I understand why you tried. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and I could almost imagine his voice, the one I barely remembered but had never forgotten. You tried to buy me a father because you couldn't be one. But Richard proved what you probably feared, that love isn't a service you can purchase. It's a gift freely given, or it's nothing at all. I placed a small stone on each grave, a Jewish tradition Mom had taught me, for remembrance. I'm okay now, I told them both. Richard's invoice actually freed me. For 20 years, I thought I owed him for tolerating me. Now I know the truth. He owed me for taking money to love me and failing to deliver. But I don't want his money. I want something worth more. The knowledge that I deserved love without a price tag. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Daniel, this is Richard. The donation has been made. $450,000 to the Children's Home Society. I'm sorry. For all of it. I didn't respond. Some apologies came too late, cost too much, meant too little. But somewhere tonight, that money would start helping kids who really needed it. Kids who might otherwise grow up feeling like burdens, like debts, like unwanted expenses. My father's ghost had tried to buy me love and failed. But maybe his money could buy something else. Hope for children who had neither ghosts nor invoices, just the need for someone to care without keeping score. That seemed like a better investment than anything Richard had ever calculated in his ledgers. Thanks, Dad, I whispered to the wind. For trying. For caring. For proving that real love doesn't come with a bill. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell told the hour. Time moving forward, past invoices and ghosts and the price of childhood. I was free. Not because I'd won money or lost it, but because I finally understood. I had never owed anyone anything for the crime of needing to be loved. And that truth? That was priceless.